Dear journalists, sorry for delay, and now we start our briefing on general update on the OSCE SMM activity and the security situation in Ukraine. We have Mr. Alexander Hook, Deputy Chief Monitor of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission in Ukraine.
Good afternoon, dear friends. Please apologize my late arrival here to this briefing. Since I last spoke to you, the SMM has observed a sustained high level of ceasefire violations involving often frequent and intense exchanges of fire in multiple locations along the contact line, in particular in the Donetsk region. Mortars and larger caliber artillery are now being used in huge numbers. The number of explosions attributed to the indiscriminate use of such supposedly withdrawn weapons reached over 700 in the course of last week. This is the highest number of explosions recorded in a week since autumn last year. The SMM is seriously concerned with these developments. The Chief Monitor, Ambassador Apakan, in his statement issued last night, called upon all sides to honor the commitments they have made, uphold a sustained ceasefire, and to ensure the safety of civilians in the conflict zone. It is necessary for the sides to cease the fire, to withdraw weapons, to stop placing mines, and to create a zone without danger, a security zone. The area of government-controlled Avdiivka and DPR-controlled Yasinovata remained volatile, with the vast majority of violations in Donetsk region recorded there. On Monday, we recorded nearly 400 explosions, 260 of those in a 30 minutes period. We continue to record high numbers of explosions in the area of the Donetsk airport and near Svetlodarsk. The SMM has also noted a steady increase in the number of ceasefire violations to the northeast of Mariupol. Explosions and small arms fires were recorded by the SMM in the wider area of Komiternove and Vodiane. On Tuesday and again on Wednesday night, the SMM camera positioned in Shirokine recorded exchanges of fires there between both sides. The last time I spoke to you here, I mentioned the decision related to mine action reached in Minsk. The deadline for the implementation of this decision was the 31st of March. The SMM has seen little systematic or organized action on the ground. Some warning signs are in place, and the Ukrainian side in particular has undertaken some mine risk outreach, including a TV campaign, but much more needs to be done. The sides, having agreed on measures, should implement them in all earnest. Such measures are necessary, but the contrary is happening. As we saw just last week, the SMM observed Ukraine armed forces laying mines in Solote. Over the weekend, 3 mines attached to trees were seen in Petrivske, an area under the control of the so-called DPR. This week we saw for the first time an anti-personnel mine close to the so-called LPR checkpoint in Stanica Luhanska. The placing of new mines is a violation of the Minsk package and rounds counter the recent decisions. And it is ironic, in a week that marked the International Day of Mine Awareness and Assistance in Mine Action, that this is happening. The firing of large amounts of ammunition, often using indirect fire weapons, is reckless as it endangers civilians. Injuries and damage to homes and essential infrastructure are inevitable. In Chorlivka and surrounding areas, including Holminivsky, the SMM observed damage to residential buildings. On Varlamova Street in Chorlivka, we saw a destroyed building and shrapnel damage to a nearby apartment block. Residents, some of whom had suffered minor injuries, said the area had been shelled on 31st of March. The SMM spoke to doctors treating a man who was hospitalized after setting off a booby trap in a backyard in government-controlled Troitske. With the security situation so volatile, actions taken by the sides have compounded the situation affecting civilians. Last week, over 300 civilians, including 80 elderly persons, were stranded between government and so-called LPR-controlled checkpoints near Solote, stranded in an area that had not been demined. With no resolution in sight, over the course of that day, the SMM liaised with the Ukrainian authorities and facilitated their safe return to government-controlled areas. The absence of coordination between the sides on the opening of new crossing points shows disconnect between what civilians want and what the sides want for them. Civilians have suffered enough and should not be taken hostage of the situation. With long queues of frustrated civilians at existing entry-exit checkpoints near the contact line, the opening of further crossing points would ease their burden. For example, on Monday, we saw over 250 civilians queued at the Stanica Luhanska bridge. Today's decision to close the only official crossing over the bridge in Stanica Luhanska for security reasons will increase this frustration. Inevitably, civilians will be forced to make their journeys on unapproved, dangerous paths littered with mines. Both in Stanica Luhanska and Solote, the SMM stands ready to facilitate dialogue between the sides to enable civilians to maintain the close ties that they have and want to have across the contact line. The SMM continue to facilitate efforts to repair essential civilian infrastructure by maintenance teams. Such efforts enabled the restarting of repairs of the gas pipelines between government-controlled Marinka and DPR-controlled Oleksandrivka. However, the work was called off with just 300 meters of pipeline to be repaired after workers came under small arms fire. If reconnected, the line will benefit over 60,000 residents and industry on both sides of the contact line. Civilian repair workers were taking and have been taking risks to restore some normality to people's life and should not be targets. The deliberate disruption of essential repair is unacceptable, with civilians once again paying the price. So-called DPR and so-called LPR members continued to restrict and impose conditions on the SMM's monitoring, which, as I have outlined so many times here, limits our ability to observe the reality on the ground and report our findings, but this is also in contravention of our mandate and the Minsk Agreement. In a serious incident yesterday, an SMM vehicle was shot at and damaged in the vicinity of non-government controlled Shnizhny. Later the same day, so-called LPR members stopped the SMM near Smile and pointed weapons at our monitors. I shouldn't have to remind anyone, but let me reiterate, these incidents are completely unacceptable. Access to Yasinovata continued to be decided by armed DPR members, denying access despite the intervention from the Joint Center for Control and Coordination. On every day of the week except one, they imposed an escort on the SMM as a condition to patrol in the vicinity of Yasinovata. So-called DPR and so-called LPR members also imposed restrictions on the SMM's freedom of movement in border areas outside of government control. Dear friends, during last week, the SMM continued to observe that the Joint Center for Control and Coordination functions in a way that is neither joint nor coordinated. In the parts of Donetsk region, under the control of the so-called DPR, Ukraine Armed Forces personnel continue to have a presence in Bezimene in the south only. This state of affairs is not conducive to reducing tension. A joint center, able to work jointly and cooperatively, has an important and constructive role. This week, I would like to inform you that we continue to expand our footprint on the ground. Our forward patrol base in Stanica Luhanska is now fully operational again, with 4 monitors now located there around the clock. Our current strength stands at 688 monitors, 570 of whom are based in the eastern part of the country. We also have 290 Ukrainian colleagues working for the SMM, plus an additional 82 other international staff. Thank you for your attention, and I'm available to questions should you have.
Thank you very much. Чи є запитання або уточнення? Are there any questions or clarifications? Yeah, we have the first question.
I mean, nothing new under the sun, we could say, but is there any explanation, this is my first question, if I have understood it correctly, that says less ceasefire violations in the Lugansk area, in the so-called LNR territories, than in Donetsk area. Is there any explanation for this? Because it's interesting that they are shooting more in Lugansk. And the second question is concerning the situation of the civilian population. How is the situation in this way in the Donetsk area? Because this is administrative checkpoints. Very often we see people have to wait hours and hours to pass. Has something improved, or are they still waiting hours and hours? Because when it's coming again very hot, then the situation there will be even worse.
I will start answering with your second question. We accept the need for the Ukrainian government to control the flow across the contact line. What is needed is that more of such crossings are opened, and that at the crossings the flow of traffic is eased, and that the traffic as such is made safe and secure. With the closing of the Stanitsa-Luhanska pedestrian crossing today, there is not a single official crossing now in the Luhansk region open to civilians. This situation forces civilians to take unapproved, dangerous paths through forests and fields, which are not cleared of mines. With regard to your first question, I have to emphasize that it is unusually high numbers of ceasefire violations that we register since quite a while now. We see more use of heavy weapons. The restraint of using mortars and artillery is not any longer visible. We see more restrictions of freedom of movement for civilians. We see more attacks on the SMM. We see more humanitarian needs within the security zone. And we once again see more people fleeing the security zone. These are all indicators that direct towards an increase in tension, which deserves attention and action by those who can. The reason why we see more violations on the Donetsk side in the security zone may have many causes. One of which is that the sides stand very close to each other on the Donetsk side, whereas on the Luhansk side they are divided, at least in a large part, by the Donets river that allows not direct engagement by the sides across the contact line. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have one more question.
Доброго дня, пан Хук.
Mr. Hubg, I have two questions. I'm representing 1+1 TV channel. The first question about that wedding which your monitors attended jointly with the militants. What happened to them? Do you know what is happening to them now? And whether you can say about impartiality of the members of your mission, and do you know what will be decision of the President Poroshenko as to your mission, whether you will continue to work in the East, and what will happen and when?
Thank you for the question. Allow me to clarify that this picture that circulated in social media yesterday were taken in June 2015, last year. The monitors on this picture not any longer work for the special monitoring mission. We have made clear in advance that we regret this incident and that these two monitors have exposed unprofessional and unconsidered behavior. Any monitor working for us signs a strict code of conduct. Who violates the conduct and the code of conduct will be subject to disciplinary proceedings, which may result in the dismissal of that said member of staff. The OSCE Special Monitoring Mission's operations in the eastern part of the country is decided by the Permanent Council, and that council has extended the operations of the mission for another 12 months until March 2017. And with regard to your first question, again, on the wedding as such, I also have to clarify that the monitors did not attend the wedding as such. The pictures were taken in front of an administrative building where these people happened to stand.
Ще, будь ласка, уточнення все ж.
And one more specification about the second question, whether Petro Poroshenko yesterday mentioned about self-police mission. Do you know something about this self-police mission?
I'm not sure to what report you refer to. The OSCE's mandate has been decided on the 21st of March 2014. It's available online and has just been extended for another 12 months until March 2017. Additional operations in any form or shape will have to be decided in the appropriate format, and I can't further comment here.
Thank you very much. Yes, and we have one more clarification.
What's the impression of your observers about the social and medical situation of the people which are living in the uncontrolled areas? Very often here we hear reports that there are a lot of problems with medicine supply, mostly also for elderly people, for people with permanent diseases like rheuma, like diabetes and so on. Can you comment on this a little bit?
Thank you. I have already made clear that we have seen an increase in humanitarian needs in the security zone. It is lesser intense behind that zone on both sides of the line, of course. The needs that we see is especially for special goods, special medicine, special equipment that is needed. We have seen, for instance, that dialysis hardware and medication consumables are hard to come by in non-government controlled areas. This is caused, on the one hand side, by the very strict regulation that non-government organizations and government organizations are subjected to in these areas not controlled by the government. And secondly, of course, it's compounded by the security situation. Deliveries face equal security risks to reach these areas within the security zone.
Thank you very much. This was the last question for today, and the press conference is over. Дякую. Це було останнє уточнення на цьому прес-конференції.
Thank you very much. This was the last briefing for today.